Dear learners, welcome to this session where we would be discussing the environment of NGOs. We had already discussed the working of NGOs, but how do they work? Where do they work? And why do they work? So they need a certain kind of a space for the working. So in this case, we'll be discussing the environment of NGOs, how the environment is related to the working of NGOs. Now this is a very beautiful concept. We know about environment in different sense. We always think that environment consists of trees, the nature, the water, all the 5 elements of the nature, etc., etc. But did you ever think that NGOs also have an environment? We also have been seeing and witnessing, and there are so many management students, they must be knowing that we have business environment also. We have different kinds of environment related to the corporates. But have we ever thought that environment can be a very important concept for NGOs? Now let us discuss this concept, environment of NGOs. Now we need to know what is an environment. You can see me sitting, right? And you can see the background, you can see the different aspects which I'm sitting around and interacting with you. Now this whole thing is an environment for me. It's a kind of an environment for me which is being visible to you. And in case of organizations also, whether they are profit-making organization or not for profit-making organizations, no organization operates in vacuum. Every organization has to have the environment for its existence, and NGOs too need an environment for their existence. And there should be a harmonious relationship with environment, which is very necessary for all the organization. We all are witnessing a very difficult situation in present times. We all are witnessing a very you can say a very uncertain situation in present times, where we don't even know that what will happen tomorrow. This is a crisis situation, and in this case the relationship between the harmonious relationship between the individuals, the organization and the environment has been broken, has been disrupted. So this is a disruption of the environment which we are seeing in the present times. So this is where we need to understand what is the need for the environment for NGOs. Now let us discuss organizational environment, and in this case it is specifically for NGOs. It can be for any organization, it can be for service organization, it can be for not-for-profit organization, it can be for profit-making organizations, even for our homes, which also act as organization where there are number of people involved. So that also has an environment, that also acts like an organization. So environment works everywhere. An environment can be of 2 types. Environment can be internal in nature, environment can be external in nature. Now in this case, for internal environment we'll give an acronym IE, and for an external environment we can give an abbreviation as EE. And for organizational environment we'll give the abbreviation as OE. So when we talk about the combination of internal environment with that of external environment, when they add on, they make the whole environment for the organization. So IE plus EE is equal to OE. That means internal environment, when you add with external environment, it becomes the organizational environment. Who are the people involved in internal environment? Now we take an example of any organization. We have discussed many case studies. We have discussed number of organizations. We have seen couple of videos of NGOs. Now in that case, if you see the internal environment always consists of the employees of that organization, the stakeholders, that means who is the end user of that organization, the needs of the stakeholders. In NGOs case, the needs can differ. It will be the cause, like The needs of the stakeholders means, in one organization we had given the example of poor elderly people. In one organization we had given the example of poor children. In one organization we had given the example of slum and street children. So there the needs differ. So needs of the stakeholders is again the internal environment, and of course the expectations of the stakeholders and the society with the organization, they formulate the internal environment of the organization. Now these aspects, the internal and external environment, we'll be discussing in more detail in the other sessions, where we will be discussing different aspects of kinds of environment. This is just a prelude to the environment, the concept of environment for NGOs. If we talk about the external environment, there are various ways to define the external environment, and this also we'll discuss in later sessions. But here I'll give you one example, that is the pestle analysis. And this analysis deals with the external environment, where the organization tries to assess the political situation, the economical situation, the social situation, the technological situation, the environmental situation, and the legal situation of the environment. Now if we see the types of organizational environment, there are varied types of organizational environment. They can be a static organizational environment, that can be a dynamic environment, it can be a complex environment, it can be an uncertain environment, it can be a multifaceted environment, it can be a far-reaching impact environment, it can be a relative environment. Now if we see the dynamic environment, before COVID-19 we all had a kind of a static environment for ourselves. That means there was a monotony. We used to work, we had a set routine of working. But now the situation is changing because the environment is uncertain. It has become more complex, and it is having a far-reaching impact in the negative sense. And then it is multifaceted also. So this particular environment in the present time includes everything. So for organizations, they need to decide which kind of environment they have to follow. There are conservative organizations who are static in nature. That means they are not ready for change. So those organizations, they do not succeed. It happens with NGOs also. There are certain NGOs who do not want to develop. Now we took an example of Helpage India, where they moved from welfare to development. You just saw that. They moved from welfare to development. That means they have broadened their scope of working. So if you are broadening yourself, then you become dynamic in nature. That means you're ready for change and you're moving to change. And in static case, you just keep on with monotony, with same ideas, same values, same principles, and you keep on working with the same idea for long, which becomes obsolete at a particular point of time. Now, if in the present uncertain environment, if the NGOs, they are not moving towards combating the crisis, then they become static in nature. They need to work for the dynamic environment and have to have a far-reaching impact on the stakeholders. If they are working for children, they need to ensure that the children should be protected against COVID-19. So that is very important. So NGOs need to decide what kind of environment. So it is better not to have a complex environment, of course, but it all depends on the internal and external environment of the organization. So these can be many types of organizational environment, and it depends on the NGOs to work on these issues. There can be a relative environment also. Like when we talked about the local NGOs, they are relative in nature. For them, that particular cause is more important than other things. So that can be a relative organizational environment. So this is all the discussion about the types of organizational environment, and let us move further and see that all NGOs, they operate in a unique environment. No single NGO can operate in isolation. They have to have mutual dependence on the society. Like NGO is related to society and society is related to NGO, and each NGO has its own environment. That is very, very important to understand. All NGOs are different. Every organization is unique. That has to be taken into consideration. You cannot compare any organization. We took different examples of NGOs. We took the example of CRY, we took the example of HelpAge India, we took the example of RUSEC. All these organizations, they are unique in nature and their environment is different. Their organizational environment is different, their internal environment is different. External environment may remain the same, but acting or combating with the external environment or trying to adjust to the external environment, that may differ. So each organization has a different environment. What is the purpose of NGOs? That is very important to understand. The need for the welfare and development of the society, that is clear. That is the purpose. What do they target? They target the welfare groups, they target the development of the stakeholders, they target the growth of the stakeholders, they target the change in the society which these NGOs will bring. So this is the purpose of NGO, which defines the environment of any NGO. Based on the purpose of NGO, this whole concept of environment is based. And that is what decides whether it is static in nature, dynamic in nature, complex in nature, uncertain in nature, multifaceted in nature, relative in nature, or uncertain in nature, whatever the case may be. Or they may be having a far-reaching impact. And to be very precise, I would say that the best of the NGOs who are successful, and the examples we have been seeing, we have been witnessing, the best of the NGOs, they are dynamic in nature, they are ready to ready to combat the crisis, and they have a far-reaching impact on the society. That is very, very important to understand for the success of NGOs, because when we study the environment, it is all related to the strategy concept, it is all related to the competitiveness of the organization, it is all related to the planning part. So this environment builds in the strategy of the organization. Why do we need the environment? The environment is required for NGOs to determine the environmental threats and opportunities. It gives the direction for growth and change. It provides the opportunity for continuous learning. For example, the COVID crisis. This is also a learning. It has so many lessons for us. How to survive in certain situations. Everybody has so many issues. People are facing mental issues, people are facing health issues. Most of the mental issues, they are arising of this particular situation. So, but it definitely provides the opportunity for continuous learning. The environment is required for image building. It is required for the brand of the organization. So NGOs, we say it is Akshay Patra, we say it is HelpAge India, we say it is RUSEC, we say it is CRY. Why do we say? So it is a brand which the environment has created of that organization. So environment is also required to determine the organizational strengths and weaknesses of any of the NGOs. So all these aspects, one by one, they will be considered in subsequent lessons. Now we see the importance of environment. The environment is very important specifically for NGOs because it influences the existence of the NGOs. If they are not able to sustain the environment, they won't be successful and they won't be able to sustain in the competitive world and the uncertain situations which we are facing as of now. No NGO can ignore the influences the environment is making. The environment helps them in decision making. The internal environment depends a lot on the internal factors and the external environment depends a lot on the external factors, and they have to be related to each other. The mutual relation with each other is very, very much important. There are certain variables related to the internal and external environment which needs to be considered. The basic environment is based on the influence of these variables, and this is very, very important for decision making. The fast changing environment poses uncertainty, and the NGOs have to be proactive than being reactive, and they should be ready for the change. Now, if you see the present situation, the NGOs have been combating the crisis far, far better than any of the corporate houses. And the reason for them is because they are so much used to uncertain situations, they are so much used to working on their own, so they become proactive in nature. And they do react to certain situations, like certain NGOs and self-help groups, they started making masks in initial period of lockdown. Now that was the reactive situation, but then slowly and slowly they build on the idea, and now they are using different activities to help the society to combat the COVID-19 crisis. In one case, we gave the example of protecting the elderly, in one case for protecting the children through the crisis. So they are becoming proactive, and this will result in the sustainability of these organizations. So that is very, very important. There are certain kinds of environmental analysis, and in this SWOT analysis is very, very important, and I'm not discussing that particular analysis here, but I'm discussing two basic analyses which are very relevant for the NGOs and in a broader sense. So the NGOs, they need to discuss the environment within themselves, they need to question themselves, they need to identify certain problems, and they need to work on these particular aspects, that is the scenario analysis and the issue analysis, because these two analyses are usually not discussed. We usually discuss the PESTON analysis, we usually discuss the SWOT analysis, but basically these two analyses in the corporate sense, they do discuss, but it is not discussed very I mean to say in popular means. But as I found, these two analyses are very, very important for decision making related to NGOs. I'll just go scan through these two analyses instead of going in too much of detail. Now, if we see the scenario analysis, requires the NGOs to go through the following steps. The first is defining the problem. There are uncertain situations coming up. Now, in this case, I'll take you an example. This example of COVID-19 crisis is the problem. The NGOs have defined the problem as how to combat with COVID-19. Now they start collecting the data or gathering the data related to the COVID-19 situation, maybe in the local area, the national area, and the international area, whatever framework the NGO is located into it. Then they start differentiating between the certainties and uncertainties. Now, if it is the COVID-19 crisis, the certainties is who is being infected, who is being not infected. And uncertainty is that the one who is being infected will get all right or will be cured or not, because the vaccine is not there. So these are the situations. So I'm just giving an example. This can be a scenario, and this builds in the scenario of the whole situation, where you need to formulate that if this happens, what will happen? If this happens, what will be the solution to this particular problem? The whole scenario has to be imagined. It's like a storytelling. You have to build in the story, you have to build in the scenes, and then discuss the whole issue. Now use these scenarios for strategic decision making. The variables or the drivers which have an impact on NGO are clearly defined, and after definition, after defining these variables, the implementation is done, and then you can make a certain decision what is to be done to combat the crisis. So this is scenario analysis. This is a brief concept of the scenario analysis. Next analysis which I would like to discuss would be the issue analysis, and this is also very important for the NGOs. They need to look into it. Actually, these concepts the NGOs may not be aware of, but if they work on these concepts, the sustainability aspect and the competitive aspect, the competitive advantage aspect is more related to the NGOs. Now, with issue analysis, they need to identify the root cause of the problem, and the issue tree is used. There are certain parameters related to the issue tree. I'll just mention some of the steps which are required in the issue tree, which is used to perform the issue analysis. And these steps include the opportunity identification. I gave you an example of mask making. That one can consider it, though it was a helping part, but one can consider that NGOs, since it is a contactless situation, they have had to work because they are working for a cause. So they identified this as an opportunity. They took this challenge as an opportunity, and they started making masks. There are certain organizations who are even making PPE kits. There are certain organizations like NGOs, they are supplying the hygiene kits to the rural masses, because hygiene is one of the most important aspects to combat this crisis. So one needs to identify the opportunities when we are doing the issue analysis. Then the facts need to be gathered, that where this is required, where not it is required, because when we just supply or when we just support certain causes, we need to understand what are the facts related to it. And based on these facts, the problem has to be identified. After identifying the problem, the idea for the solution has to be made. The idea has to be generated that this can be the solution. So mask was the solution. Evaluating that situation, choosing various options available, this is one of the main concept of strategic management or process of strategic management. Accepting that choice and implementing that choice. Now all these steps, they formulate the issue analysis, and this is very, very important for the NGOs. Now, to sum up, we can say that NGO environment is composed of forces or institutions which are surrounding the NGO, and they affect their performance, operations, and of course the resources. The major issues in resources is the funding part. So this is one area where they can generate the funds from. So if they are able to identify the opportunities, it includes all the elements that exist inside and outside of the NGOs, and they have the potential to influence the NGOs. To manage the NGOs effectively, managers, they need to properly understand the environment. Managers who are governing, who are operating the NGOs. So this is all about environment. Thank you so much.